Greetings, YouTube. Today I will be reviewing The Sword of No Sword, Life of the Master Warrior Teshu. Master Teshu was a samurai in the classical sense. Born at the turbulent era in of Japan's history, rather. I don't know if I said China, but where the Europeans and Americans basically showed up with cannons and said, "You're going to trade with us." And he was part of the group that helped make the transition from the shogunate to the imperial rule. And he was an advisor of the emperor for 10 years. He had an interesting life, to say the least. And one of the things that I found most fascinating about the man is not only was he an accomplished swordsman, he was a master, he was an accomplished calligrapher, and he was a Zen master, having achieved Buddhist Zen enlightenment at age 45, which makes me smile and shake my head because I didn't become a Zen Buddhist master at 45. Which is when he founded his own school of swordsmanship, the Muto-Ryu. It's R-Y-U. I don't know if I'm saying that properly. I apologize. I do not speak Japanese. And this is a biography of his entire life from birth till death. He died in 1888. And it is extremely detailed in certain aspects and very vague in others. And what do I mean by that? You learn a lot about his training in all of the ways, capital W, that he mastered: Zen Buddhism, swordsmanship, and calligraphy. He did found his own school of swordsmanship, which is still in practice today. And he is estimated, a conservative estimate, to have penned 1 million pieces of calligraphy. Yes, 1 million. As many as 500 or more a day. And he was a generous man and pretty much almost always destitute, as the system that was supposed to support samurai essentially disappeared. But he was able to support himself in some means through his calligraphy and through his teaching of swordsmanship, but he never was wealthy, and creditors were showing up all the time. Interestingly, he would write them IOUs, and some of the creditors considered the IOU he gave them of greater value as a piece of artwork than the debt he owed them. So they never returned. That was quite interesting. He was also a Zen poet, besides copying classical Chinese pieces of calligraphy and developing his own personal style. But he did pen his own. Let me give you an idea of what his particular calligraphy looked like. There we go. And he also did, here's one that he penned. And there was one in here that I happen to find particularly attractive, at least to my taste. But I freely admit that I do not have the sophistication that is really required. Here it is. Really required to appreciate this one here. This one right there. To appreciate the artwork that he developed. I have a piece of Japanese art somewhere in my collection. I didn't put it back up again when we moved, because we didn't have any place to put it. I should get back out again. I don't know where I put it though. It's a scroll, so it's not difficult to tuck away somewhere. Here's another good piece. Oops. And as I said, he was a poet, and he wrote one particular piece that became very well known. And here is the piece in question. And then the translation is: "Perfect when clear, perfect when cloudy. Mount Fuji's original form never changes." And there's a passage in here, and I don't remember if he wrote it or if it was a transcription of a Chinese classic, but two of the lines that stuck with me from the book is, "The moon does not think to be reflected. the water does not think to reflect. And that, to me, really encompasses sort of the Zen philosophy. Now, I read about Zen Buddhism quite a bit when I was younger, and I'm happy to say that there have been brief moments in my life when I've kind of achieved that no mind. And what he meant by no sword is that when you have achieved enlightenment and you are a sword master, there is no sword, there is no enemy. There is simply a path to victory. There is literally nothing in your way. That every movement you make is as a ghost moving through the world. That your opponent has nothing they can do to stop you. That you are so in tune with everything that they do, with every thought, every feeling, every emotion, every stance, that you just move through them, defeating them to victory. And one of the little stories in here I really quite liked was that while an advisor of the emperor, there was an uprising not far away, and the alarm was sounded, and he grabbed his samurai shirt, threw it over his night clothes, ran out of his chambers with his sword in his hand, and he was the first one to get to the emperor's chambers and defend him. Eventually, the other ministers showed up, but all of them properly attired. Which is when Teshu joked to the emperor, he said, "I apologize for not being properly dressed." And the emperor thought that was very humorous. And when he went to leave, the emperor asked him to leave his sword behind as a reminder of his most loyal minister. Now think about this for a second. You are a minister to the Emperor of Japan, and you have scored a private viewing with the Emperor in his personal chambers. Something not every minister, even in the inner circle, is going to get. And you show up to the chambers, and leaning against the wall in the corner, his Teshu's sword, as a reminder that Teshu was there first. Talk about screwing with someone's mind. It was beautiful. Lovely piece of politicking on the part of the emperor. But there's also vague sections in this. For example, he discusses almost nothing about Teshu's children, and very little about his wife. He mentioned the fact that their first child died in birth, and they later mentioned that he had 5 more kids, and that one of them used his name block to forge artwork after his death. And they name that child. But the other 4, they get no mention. And whereas he speaks about how loyal and wonderful and how his life would be incomplete without his wife, and he could have never achieved his enlightenment without his wife as part of his life. There was a point in his life where he was trying to understand sexual passion. And as part of that process, he slept with thousands of women. Literally thousands of women. And he was good enough that some of them didn't charge him even though they were professionals. And he only stopped when his wife threatened to kill herself. So he wasn't always the most gracious of husbands. He was very human. But it's a fascinating book, and the poetry in here is wonderful. It's like I forget how much I love Zen poetry. I get wrapped up in the 10,000 things, and I forget that, and then I come back to it like this. And I'm part of me is sorely tempted to keep the book, but this book could do so many other people good. So it kind of makes sense to me that I should pass it on to someone else. Oh, that reminds me, I have to bring a book to work. Someone asked me to bring a book to work. All right. It's a good book. Read it. Even though the author claims that there's far more reliable information about Master Teshu than some of the other Zen masters in the past, there is still the air of legend about the man. And there should be. If you're a sword master and a Zen master, and you've penned over 1 million pieces of calligraphy, there should darn well be the air legend about you.